everybody, welcome back to Conspirinormal. Took a little bit of a hiatus here the last few weeks, and part of the reason why was that I was in Seattle with Surfiel.
We got a crew back together.
Yeah, we did. We had an interesting time. Surfiel took me to several places in the Seattle area that were really interesting. And while we were there, we met the guest that we're going to have on tonight, which is Bryan Shickley.
Howdy.
Brian, we met you right across the Puget Sound from Maury Island.
Do you remember trying to film when we were over there?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yes.
And every 10 seconds, hi, my name is... with the airplanes coming by.
Yeah, we were very close to the airport, as I discovered later.
That was fun. That was a fun time.
Yeah, so we're kind of going to do like a little bit of a two-parter between this week and next week, which is we've got you coming on and tonight, and then we've got Dean Bertram coming back on, because you guys are kind of working the same material in the same vein about figures that have to do with Maury Island.
And figures of questionable authenticity, too.
Yes, very much so. But the one we're going to talk about tonight, for the most part, is going to be Fred Crisman. I guess we talked to Ken Thomas back in the day about Maury Island Incident, and I think we probably have mentioned Fred Crisman on this show, or Go Rightly has probably mentioned Fred Crisman on this show once or twice. But I don't think we've ever actually did a whole show or like gone into depth on Fred Crisman or who he was.
No, not at all. And he is from the Puget Sound area, from Tacoma, I believe, actually. So
right.
That is why he played into, both the Maury Island and then the periphery of the Kenneth Arnold sighting as well.
Yes. And so we're going to get into this. And Brian, you have done a short animated film.
Yep.
That actually, as we noticed, made the Fred Crisman Wikipedia page even.
Which I swear wasn't me.
Called Fred Crisman Cave of the Space Nazis.
That's right.
So let's talk a little bit about, well, you got this background in animation. And let's talk also about how you became interested in this strange figure of Fred Crisman.
Your job is going to be to stop me from talking about why I'm interested in Fred Crisman, because
that is totally fine.
Brutal. I got out of college, 2016, 2017, and I was desperately looking for work. I did a pilot for Adult Swim and a project for Five Finger Death Punch, and they were really exciting, but very little came out of it. And I was getting so angry that I was running out of opportunities and time. And I was an intern for Scott Schaefer, who he and Steve are the producers and director of the Maury Island Incident. When was that? 2014. So I watched the movie with a close friend of mine, and we were really noticing that all they can do is character studies because they have live action actors. Anytime you flash back to the UFOs, you see a big CGI. Just it's hard to make a UFO look good. They don't even look good in real life when people see them. They look fake. So it really discredited how the quality of the story could be told. And then we realized when this Crisman character had written to amazing stories, you could do an animation or a comic series and you could make it look like those old pulp magazines. Yeah. With like way too much black shading and ink nibs, and technology got to that place where you could finally make a cartoon that looks like that. So that's how we started. And once we realized that Harold Dahl, the UFO witness, knew a guy named Fred Crisman, we clicked the Fred Crisman link. And then we see it and it's like, Fred Crisman was born in Oregon. He moved to Tacoma. And then it goes, he was known for fighting underground creatures in a cave in Burma. And we're like, what? Why didn't they make that movie? So we got really excited, and I've got a copy of Crisman's his encounter in the cave story that's really good. We can read it if you guys want. So it's 3 a.m. We're walking around Seattle. nice little neighborhood, and we're just reading.
Sirs, I flew my last combat mission on May 26th when I was shot up over Bassein and ditched my ship off Remery Rosa, Nuba Island. I was missing 5 days. I requested leave at Kashmir. I and Captain, deleted by request, left Sringar and went to Rudok and through the Kesha Pass to the northern foothills of the Kabak Haram. We found what we were looking for. For heaven's sake, drop the whole thing. You're playing with dynamite. My companion and I fought our way out of a cave with submachine guns. I have 2 9-inch scars on my left arm that came from wounds given to me in the cave when I was 50 feet from an object of any kind and in perfect silence.
I don't know what that part means. An object of any kind.
So, he said that the wounds were, my friend had a hole the size of a dime in his right bicep. It was seared inside. How? We don't know. But we both believe we know more about this Shaver mystery than any other pair. Drop the whole thing. You're playing with dynamite.
And that, you get it. He's like the Stanley of conspiracies.
This was written to Amazing Stories?
Yep. It was in the letters to the editor. I don't know
which were being flooded with all these, responses of people's own stories about Darrows and the underworld, inspired by the first Shaver stories, right?
Yeah. Are you guys? Have you guys heard other like Darrow stories? Because there are others, like encounters.
Yeah, I've read some of like the fan fiction stuff or whatever you want to call it. Some of the stuff from Shavertron magazine and a few of the notable Shaverites who were doing their own like underworld caving and stuff like that.
Oh yeah. Have you talked to Richard Toronto?
I have not.
Okay, he's a hard guy to get, but he runs that website Shavertron. I think he's like 180 years old now. Like he's the last living Shaver fan that's from that era. And he's so nice, and he actually put some of my art up. He's the coolest dude ever, but he doesn't do a lot of public interviews, so I'm always trying to find someone who's talked to him.
Well, it's a scary world out there full of Darrows trying to get you, so
aren't they great?
I sympathize.
I want to back up a little bit and talk a little bit about Crisman and who he was, like what his background was. Just to put all this kind of in context, talk a little bit about the Maury Island Incident too, which we got to see, which was really cool to be there. But and also, what I want to talk about was like his political views were too.
Okay, yeah. Well, Crisman was the son of a hotel owner in Vail. They owned the Vail Hotel. And then I believe his dad left the picture and he moved to Tacoma, and he became known as this ultra right-wing Tacoma character. He had no power, but he would write these angry stories. When he got drafted into World War II, he was a fighter pilot, and he ended up he really loved science fiction. So he became known for telling science fiction stories, or science fact as he would call it, because he, to his dying day, defended his Darrow story. He went on to have an assistant or a friend named Harold Dahl, who saw 6 UFOs floating above their boat. They claim it was a few days before the Kenneth Arnold sighting, which in turn makes it just barely pre-Roswell. So they have really, really deep ties to UFO lore. They are part of why UFO lore is considered what it is. They helped create the myth of the Man in Black, or they documented a Man in Black, and that's just what's been happening. After that, Crisman went on to become known for his ultra right-wing radio show where he assumed the name John Gold and would pick all sorts of fights with people. It's like the internet just beforehand. He would pick fights with political figures and anyone who wanted to spar with him verbally. And then after all is said and done, Jim Garrison investigated the Kennedy assassination, and multiple people had pointed at Fred Crisman as the guy leaving the grassy knoll.
Yeah.
So he seems to be the Forrest Gump of conspiracy theories. He's either the most interesting man who ever lived or the most interesting liar who ever lived. In fact, that's what his wife even said about him. She said when they split up, would you ever find someone else? And she said, no one will ever be as interesting as that guy.
Yeah, I mean that's a good summary, and that's why he's so interesting because here he is in the Shaver mysteries, then the birth of the UFO mythos in the modern era as we know it, and then the Kennedy assassination. I mean, you can't cover more ground and all this like weirdness and conspiracy theory than that.
He had good SEO. Like he was
Yeah,
part of every major event.
the line between reality and fantasy is really blurred. It's really hard to tell with this guy.
And I don't even know if he knew the difference. But when we were reading that story, it was 3 a.m. Spiderweb started hitting my face. Like it was 3 a.m. and we're looking up and we're checking the streetlights to see like we weren't doing drugs, but we're like, are we high? And we realized that just as we had read that, baby spiders started catching the air and their little tiny webs were hitting us. And it was almost like, oh, the government knows I know about Crisman now. I better get out of here.
The
It just
Darrows or
made
the
me
Men in
wanna.
Black or
It's always some force, right?
yeah, choose your
The
secret
Darrows are
rulers.
they're so funny because I think they're actually supposed to be humans. Like if you read those old stories, it says they pass for humans, but then they go and they have these giant elephant-like noses. But for context, they're inbred, obese, what underground. They're like chud characters, but they've got these big long Gonzo from the Muppet noses, and they always ride the line between really creepy and really funny to me.
Let's back up just a little bit with the Darrows and that
Yeah.
mythology and the Shaver mysteries and like kind of like what that is. Because we have mentioned this before, but just to give people like in the audience an
Oh
idea
yeah, yeah, yeah.
of what the Shaver mysteries are when we're talking about the Darrows and the Tarrows, like what we're talking about and how Fred Crisman just kind of inserts himself into this whole mythology.
See, yeah, I don't even know where to start with any of this. The so Raymond Palmer was the editor of Amazing Stories. He both famously got it to peak viewership and famously tanked it. Um, he he had this belief that you could take any kind of bad idea and turn it into a good one. And they were throwing fan letters into the garbage like they didn't want to accept unsolicited material. And Palmer said, "What you call yourself an editor? I'm gonna post the next one I find." And he just grabs one out of the garbage, and it was a Warning to Future Man, I believe is the name, and it's Shaver Richard Sharp Shaver, a spot welder, talking about how he had heard these voices underground that were saying things like "put him on the rack, torture him," and he realized, oh, there's underground creatures, and I need to go investigate this. And all his stories are about Atlantis and Lemuria, which are sort of these pseudoscientific concepts of parts of the world we're not able to access. And he would encounter the Darrow, and he would encounter his girlfriend, I believe Nydia, who was she's like a half fawn. I don't know how much of this is Shaver telling the truth and how much of this is Palmer creating pulp
Right.
out of it.
Because
But
Shaver wasn't,
yeah,
he didn't appear to be all there.
Right.
and I wonder how much of that is failure of the healthcare system. I wonder how much of that is Palmer leading into it.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like you guys probably know who Chris Chan is. There's like a lot of Chris Chans throughout history. Like people where it's like, do we tell them that this cartoon stuff isn't real? Nah, just let them keep going. It's
Right.
got that element where you both feel bad, but you also feel kind of scuzzy about how they're putting the stories out. Palmer may or may not have been exploiting Shaver's delusions.
Right.
I choose to believe that they're real, but I can't. I've never seen a Darrow.
Well, you're not the only one who believes in him.
Yeah, there's sightings, which is interesting. And I got to show you guys this YouTube channel. There's a guy who films his backyard, and then he sort of zooms in really fast and turns up the contrast, and he's like, "Look, there's a Darrow in my backyard," and he makes a new video every day. And I'm always fascinated with people like that. Like I see Bigfoot every day.
It's like those the Bigfoot habituators that like that's a real thing. That's a real phenomenon where
Just like finding Well, actually, that's also pareidolia. You know, you're pointing at the
Yeah.
grass in your yard, and
Well,
it's too far away.
it's these
Yeah.
people that say that like they live with Bigfoot and like Bigfoot hangs out with them, but yet somehow
What?
yeah, that's like a thing in Bigfoot lore or the Bigfoot subculture. It's like
So
there's
it's like
books about this. Yeah.
our life with Bigfoot. Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah, but somehow they never actually take a picture. There's never
Well,
actually a
Bigfoot's allergic to
picture of
cameras.
yeah, of
There's a
them
great
hanging out
art
with
bell.
Bigfoot.
There's a great art bell where with Bigfoot, there's a Bigfoot lady who goes, I always make pies on my windowsill, and Bigfoot comes and he eats the pies, and he's like, well, ma'am,
Yes.
could you get a camera out there? Well, Bigfoot's allergic to cameras, and but he comes here every day and knock knock
Yeah,
knock. Oh, here's Bigfoot knocking on the glass for a pie, and
those are the type of people that we're talking about, basically.
I love
Well,
them.
like, so the Richard Shaver stuff, like, it is one, and I think we're gonna talk more about this with Dean next week, but it is really like the kind of precursor to the UFO mythology, the way that I see it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Like it's very like all the elements are there, and especially with the later abduction stuff, it's kind of this bridge between all this kind of like weird Lemurian shit and the later UFO abduction.
But
And
it's
so
participatory too. So,
yeah, yeah, and so you got this guy Richard Shaver that sees these things, and I believe in Pennsylvania says he goes underground, and it gets picked up by Ray Palmer. I think Amazing Stories was that the magazine? I'm
yeah.
pretty
yep,
sure. And like it gets picked up by him and he runs with it and it becomes this big thing. And really, even now, today, it's kind of like I don't know if you've heard of Hellier, but that's kind of
yeah,
like it even comes up in that too. It's still it has this resonance, but it's like right at the cusp of where UFOs are going to start, and then Kenneth Arnold happens, and the Maury Island incident happens, Roswell happens,
Yeah.
and it's like that's where it goes to.
Then
So it's
everyone
like,
looks to the sky instead of
yeah,
underworld secret
yeah, and it
rooms.
never quite gets off the ground necessarily with the Darrows, the and the Shaver mystery stuff.
well, the are the Deros native to the planet? Because I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think so. I think they're supposed to be. I think they're supposed to
Okay.
be because it's like, what is it? They call them the Deros, Dero.
Oh,
Supposed to be
detrimental
detrimental
energy robots.
robots. And then
Yeah.
there's the good guys, which are the Teros. And as I've always understood it, and I think Justin McHenry talked about this, is that this plays into some of these ideas that were going around about Mount Shasta and about Lemuria and some
God,
of these things that were out there just kind of in kind of the zeitgeist, especially within like the IM movement, which had a big this weird outgrowth of theosophy that had a big association to Mount Shasta.
and it's still going on too. There, if you type in Lemuria right now, there's a lady who went on like I believe she was an actress and she went on the news and oh, I remember my past life, you know, being an Atlan and
Right.
it that Mount Shasta stuff, the theosophy is still growing and I'm surprised by that. It's never going to grow like it did, but all the contactees and all those kind of UFO people, they take some mildly different shape and it's never going to stop and I appreciate that.
Yeah, I feel like the Mount Shasta stuff is kind of making this weird comeback. And the Lemuria stuff is making a weird comeback.
I think that has to do with Facebook and I think and
Yeah.
stop me if I'm becoming a conspiracy guy, but something happened with Google curating their search results where I've noticed this giant schism. It's sort of the way that politics happen too, where your answers to what you want to find out are so filtered out by what do they say? There's like 200 new Google results for what you're searching for per day. So they have to curate. They get rid of the flat earth people. They get rid of the you're not going to hear as much about those kind of
Yeah.
subcultures.
Yeah.
And then they sort of become this this echo chamber where you go back and I also was at Lemuria. And now those people believe it 3 times as much, 4 times as much.
Yeah, the algorithms they get enough positive feedback from the craziest shit that they just feed it back to you and amplify all this stuff.
And that's very common in social structures. Stan Lee knew that too. And that's why, if you recall, a true believer was someone who was part of his Marvel club, the Marvel Marching Society.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's us versus them, and we got to stick together. And that's existed since the beginning of time, I think.
So Crisman is a part of this original paranormal American subculture of the shaver mysteries. Makes it easy for him to transition right into
He trend hopped.
Yeah, the UFO, which was the new thing.
Right. And what's interesting about the UFO is that Kenneth Arnold, who I don't think we've introduced yet, he sees crafts in the sky that he believes may or may not have been organic almost. Like he saw a formation of mouse cursor looking UFOs in the sky.
Around another mystical mountain, Mount Rainier.
Yep, Mount Rainier.
Which I think Adam was pretty impressed by, were you?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it was really really cool flying into the city and
Oh, you
seeing
got to see it from above?
seeing it from above. Yeah, it was
That's so cool.
it was magnificent.
Didn't see
And
any of
it just,
those
like,
winged
it's-
saucers.
Did not, but Serfiel kept pointing it out as we were driving around, and like it's just it just looms over the whole city. I mean, you can just see
Yeah.
it, and it seems like it's like really close, but it isn't. And
And it puts a shadow over Tacoma.
yeah, and even being at the airport, like I could just see it just like in the distance. I mean, it's just it is impressive.
It is weird and magical. I work retail. I unload trucks and do that kind of stuff to afford me my Crisman actors. And I talked to someone once. You always meet these people, just a normal everyday person. And he goes, I was on Mount Rainier once, and I don't tell people this often, but my car stopped working and I needed to get home. And my girlfriend and I, we put the car in neutral with no power steering, and we're just coasting it down the mountain. And he was looking, and he saw a group of people just standing there staring at him as he was going down. And then he went back down further, and there were more people whose engines just stopped. And I don't know what any of that actually means. I just love it. There's something so spooky. He set such a good tone for what you consider this weird mystical part of Washington culture.
The Kenneth Arnold sighting, he sees these flying objects.
Yeah.
Mount Rainier and Mount Adams.
And he reports that we'll know what they are by supper time tonight, which is one of my favorite quotes. I'm sure we'll know what they are by supper time tonight. And that was what, 80 years ago? I think he thought they were either Soviet or some US, like, I think it was much closer to home than what we would speculate now.
Mm-hmm.
But he was asked how do they fly? And he goes like if you skip a rock, and he goes, the reporter goes, I don't understand. Okay, take a saucer and you throw it. And it's like a saucer that's flying. And he goes, oh, it looked like a flying saucer. And suddenly he accidentally coins the phrase. And now the entire world suddenly starts seeing not only UFOs, but they're saucer shaped.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes me wonder about how much of UFO lore is hallucinations, or how much of it, like, it's weird that he coincidentally happened to know the shape that everyone else saw the UFOs. I don't know.
Right.
Do you guys have any input
some
on that?
kind of yeah? People speculate, is that some kind of way that the collective unconscious works, or is this some kind of psychic thought form that's traveling between people, or egregore or whatever.
And also, people through the concept of history, or through history, have always had concepts of dragons. They've always stuff like that, where humans seem to sometimes have a weird understanding of a concept that may just be programmed into us naturally, or maybe there's an invisible Wi-Fi in our brains. I don't know. but it's fascinating to see what different people at different times will both mutually see without any recognition of the other.
And so before Kenneth Arnold sees these flying objects,
Right.
supposedly an associate of Fred Crisman, what is it, 3 or 4 days before, on June 21st, 1947, sees these flying discs
Right.
above the
And
sound near Maury Island.
Harold Dahl, who ended up becoming rumor was he was an illegal arms dealer in the war. Crisman met him somehow, and they ended up becoming best buddies. He and Dahl both seemed to refuse the concept of a 9 to 5, so they would do anything for work. And one of such things was they would fish for logs that had fallen off of barges, and they would take them, find the branding, and then sell them back to the timber company.
Right.
And now you definitely can't do things like that, but back then apparently that was a moderately lucrative business for them. Um, I think the boat was called the Old Queen. I could be completely wrong, but it was a military surplus boat, and Harold Dahl was with his son Charles and his dog, who I believe is unnamed. I think lately they've been calling him Sparky. The radio
Okay.
starts fizzing out. They look up and they see 6 crafts slowly descending over the boat and rotating in a clockwise manner. One of them, in the one in the center, starts shaking and sputtering and making all sorts of noise. Smoke starts shooting out of the top of it, and suddenly this donut shaped entryway, like this circular entryway in there, makes it donut shaped. It starts spewing molten debris out, causing steam to rise from the water. It's causing the boat to get damaged. The dog's freaking out, pacing around the boat. Dahl's screaming and panicking and trying to get someone on the radio. They then manage to get the boat as far away as they possibly can. They crash it straight into the ground, which is true. They do crash the boat right into the land. They just jump off and start running for it and hide under the trees. What adds some credibility is they go to the beach later and they start finding this debris, and they're finding it wedged into the tree branches. Like, apparently the tree branches were actually manipulated by whatever this molten debris is. They call it slag.
Mhm.
Um, and that's what starts this whole Maury Island mythos.
Yeah, and so then Crisman goes back the next day and gets a sample of this slag.
And Crispin says he's a lie. He's like, I don't believe this UFO nonsense. I fought, Daros in a cave last year.
Yeah, yeah.
So Crispin goes back and sees it. He stands at the dock and checks the boat out, and he sees a craft in the air, according to legend. He decides he's going to take a picture of it, a picture that never sees the light of day, apparently. There's no evidence of any of these pictures, but the rumor is that there was some sort of radiation burn on him, so the picture would have looked like nothing anyway. They inform Raymond Palmer about this. Palmer decides that he's going to recruit Kenneth Arnold, who had just gotten over this newfound fame of being the weirdo who saw UFOs. Kenneth Arnold flies to Tacoma to meet Crisman and start investigating the boat and start investigating what happened. And ultimately, I think Crisman scared the living shit out of him.
Soon after,
Oh.
we have another birth of an entire genre of
Oh yeah, I jumped right
paranormal
over it.
UFO adjacent stuff. We have the first appearance of a man in black.
That's true. Now the Man in Black thing's a little suspicious to me, and I'll tell you why. But I'll tell you about the Man in Black first. Obviously, Dahl wakes up one day. There's a man standing at his porch. He says, "I'm sorry to hear what happened to your dog. Please come with me." And they drive to the nearest Denny's or Sherry's or wherever they were going, a diner. and they had breakfast, and the man in black does not blink. He does not break eye contact. He stares at Dahl and then just starts explaining. There were 6 discs over your boat. The boat got mangled. I'm sorry that the dog is dead. You now know that I know what happened to you. And if I know what happened to you, I know what is going to happen to you if you tell anyone. You've been warned. Do not tell anyone or bad things will happen to you. Bad things will happen to your child. And Dahl's just scared beyond all belief. And he immediately starts recanting the story and backing away. And he famously said, if anyone asks, I will say I'm the biggest liar who ever lived. And his son got burned by the UFO debris. His son Charles got his arm burned. They interviewed Charles later, and Charles claimed that none of this happened. So I don't know. I like to wonder about it. But the man in black was not specifically named as such at the time. There was just some man in a suit who came to interview him. And was it Gray Barker who coined the man in black? Or Albert Bender? Who was it who?
Albert Bender was the first one to.
Okay.
Albert Bender was the first one to, supposedly the first one that encountered the Men in Black, which was kind of weirdly associated with some of these like odd rituals that he was doing. And
he was interesting.
And Gray Barker was the one that helped. He published his book, so it was kind of both of those two guys together that kind of came up with the idea. And I guess
so
there's this little precursor there at Maury Island too.
Right, that pattern that there's some government person or some entity or culture or society that's bent on keeping you quiet. And I don't know where all those guys went. I would like to think that they're real and they just found a way to blend in. But who knows what they actually talk to. My favorite interpretation is always when they're like space aliens that are trying to dress up like a human. I think those are always the spookiest. In my version, they're sort of an ancient society they're not human but adjacent to human. And you'll have to see it when it comes out, but I really like the Man in Black concept, and it went on to inspire, due to Crisman and due to the Man in Black lore, it went on to inspire the X-Files. The Smoking Man is...
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Crisman's son believes that wholeheartedly. He thinks that the Smoking Man is inspired by Crisman. The Smoking Man, obviously, in the show, he kills Kennedy.
Right.
And Martin Luther. He kills a few political figures.
Yes.
And
I believe it puts him at some UFO events as well. There's like a big montage and like one of the episodes that focuses on him, right? That kind of, like you said, the Forrest Gump thing kind of like shows him in all these historical circumstances.
God, I love the Man in Black. Crisman's son said, now my dad has been accused of being the Marlboro Man in X-Files, but that's not true. He only smoked Luckies.
Also associated with the Maury Island thing is that there is this weird plane crash that supposedly they take the material and this plane crashes. So that's associated with it too.
Arnold basically flew into town. There was a reservation in his name at the Winthrop Hotel, which he had no recollection of anyone setting up.
And Ray Palmer sends him, right?
Ray Palmer sends him, yeah. Says, you're the guy who discovered UFO, so I trust you to lie about it the least, which, all right, why not? But he ultimately goes to the Winthrop Hotel. Crisman picks him up. He takes him there. They go up to room 502, I believe, and they start getting phone calls explaining exactly who's in the room, what they're doing. You know, Crisman's over here with a cup of coffee in his hand, and they get freaked out. So they go out and investigate the debris, and he starts noticing that the debris actually did find its way into the trees. They start filling up boxes of it as much as they could. Crisman has so much that he starts using one piece as an ashtray. Arnold says, okay, I got to call some friends. And he calls, an old war buddy, I believe. Lieutenant Smith and Brown were the two men who ultimately get the debris. They look at the debris. They say this is important. He gives it to Smith and Brown to put on a B-25 bomber. So they set up the B-25 bomber. Crisman gives him like a cereal. I believe he says a cornflakes box of. Crisman must have been short for boxes.
Yeah,
They put
like
it in a case.
doesn't he drive up on them as they're leaving, the story goes? Yeah, I believe he drives up like at the airport as they're
Like they're
getting ready to
about to
board
take
this
off.
plane, and he's like, "No, you got to take this with you." And then
This is very important.
yeah,
I understand there's a box that said top secret cargo that he put it into. Now, what that means is, it's up to you. But they said it was top secret. They put it in this box. I believe the right engine explodes as it's flying over Kelso, which is where Bigfoot lives. Apparently, there's all sorts of weird little coincidences. But this plane actually, the engine bursts. The pilot got out, I believe, and then the two lieutenants didn't. So someone survived that, and I can't find a name anywhere. But because this plane hits the ground, taking all the UFO debris with it and causing multiple deaths, it now pushes Crisman into mythical territory.
mm-hmm.
And it pushes the UFO stuff into mythical territory. And suddenly now there's blood on the hands of somebody. I don't know if it's Crisman, don't know if it's the government.
And with
but now
the Men in Black being adjacent to this, it's all, really lends itself to these ideas of a cover up of the UFO phenomenon.
Which is now just old hat.
Right.
But it's crazy to think how Crisman became known for these events and Arnold became known for these events. I found out how Kenneth Arnold died recently. He started a radium mine. Or he bought a radium mine. He died of radiation poisoning. But there's like photos of him in the radium mine going, "This is so cool." It's just such a weird harbinger of
weird.
The world was so different.
Yeah, kids are playing with mercury and little radioactive play kits and do-it-yourself reactors in your
do-it-yourself radium kits.
Let's talk about Crisman as this charlatan-esque kind of figure. So you have here, you sent me this timeline that he had like all these different degrees and that he claimed to have. And so that's one of them. And so let's kind of move into like,
they call it self-made where I'm from, Adam.
Yeah, self-made.
Yeah.
And so all these kind of weird things that happened to him and is like his run-ins with the law and all these type of things that are going on.
His paranormal celebrity status.
Yeah.
Well, famously, and I think stop me if I'm wrong, I think it was the 60s, he gets pulled over by a cop. And I read it in the book, and the book has a very funny interpretation of it. But from Crisman's story is he gets pulled over. They say, "We know who you are, Mr. Crisman," and they frisk him and take his gun away. In the cops' version, there's an actual police report that says reason for arrest, and it says pulled gun on officer. And then it says penalty, and it says $100 fine. So
he's drunk
you find
too,
me,
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, he's driving under the influence. Yeah. You find me one cop that'll let you pull a gun on him. I mean, that's either Crisman's lying or they need a reason to get rid of him. That's all very sketchy, that whole story. But that was from the era that he started his radio show. I believe after the events of Maury Island, he started a radio show at KAYE Puyallup Radio.
And he becomes like this political operative and mouthpiece for a right-wing populist mayor that they have in Tacoma, who's kind of battling. Yeah. He's battling City Hall and the city manager form of government, which my understanding is that was kind of like put in place in response to real corrupt organized crime that basically controlled the city in the 50s. But like this, like during the Great Society stuff, during all the Vietnam War stuff and everything else going on, so like there's big government programs coming in from the federal government, things like that. He's like trying to resist that stuff, but he becomes like this big propagandist political operator for for this little clique in Tacoma there who are basically trying to like take over Tacoma.
Well, from my understanding, his problem with all the leftist stuff they were doing is that they would offer to gentrify a part of Tacoma. There would be very little done, and they just pocket the rest of the money. And from my understanding, with all the firings and quittings, and he was largely right about that, is that there were a lot of corrupt politicians. I'm not a big right wing guy, but I
Yeah,
think
I'm sure
Crisman
whenever
saw
there's
danger
big
where it
federal
was.
money coming through, but he was pretty extreme though.
No, he was definitely extreme. He was such a Republican that what was the phrase his son said? It would make the John Birch Society look like a bunch of commie hippies.
Wow.
Like, and I don't know a ton about his political stuff. There's no speeches I could find. He did famously work with Marshall Riconosciuto, who was an ad exec in Tacoma, whose son went on to work on government projects and get involved into the octopus murders.
Yes.
So that whole Danny Casolaro bit.
So we got
where,
another
yep,
piece of
another
the
feather in the
octopus.
hat.
Yeah.
That's a weird connection that I did not know.
Isn't it weird?
Yes.
And then also Crisman tried to act as a record, like an agent for Thomas Edward Beckham, who was one of the people accused of conspiring to kill Kennedy. He went under the name Mark Evans, and Crisman and him printed a bunch of vinyls and tried taking them from station to station to get them to play. And ultimately, they started selling the record from him to back. Like Crisman and Beckham would sell the record to each other and then just pass it back and forth. And Crisman would go, "Look, we sold 100,000 records. I don't know why anyone's not listening to our stuff. It's so good."
Yeah,
and
I mean,
that's one of
like
those.
he's
Yeah.
just a hustler, period. Like
Mhm.
anything he can get his hands on. Like he can spin a yarn, he can self promote, he can work for someone else, promote someone else, and he's down to put some muscle in. So he's just like what really fascinates me is how much of just a self-starting opportunistic kind of thug is he, and like how much did he really have any kind of like official involvement or employment with elements of the government or intelligence or whoever killed JFK. It's really murky because he's such a self-promoter and a mythologizer that it's hard to tell what's real and what's not.
And I think he wanted to feel important too. I did an event last year, a film festival thing, and a mayor of a certain part of Seattle asked me if I could film some parades for him. And he was like, the first thing he said is, "I can get you to a key to the roof of any part of the town." And then I realized that's what Crisman wanted, is he wanted a key to any part of town. He wanted to be that person. There's such a weird feeling of like responsibility or maybe just power that Crisman liked having, just because it made him feel like he was helping or that he was useful or special.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems to go hand in hand with why he would be pulled over and declare how important he was. And just psychologically, I think he just hated. He wanted to be different. He wanted to be above. He would write letters with different letterheads. You guys have talked to Go Rightly, so you know about his connection to like the Universal Life Church, mail order degree. Basically, he was an ordained minister at a place called the Universal Life Church and owned a lot. His son says he only owned the letterhead, that he wasn't ordained, but Crisman would buy letterhead at estate sales and write angry letters as whoever's stationary that was. It's fascinating, but it's not different than the internet now. There's trolling. There's people with unlimited free time that are able to mess with someone else, and I think Crisman always had free time. He was sort of a neat too. You guys know what neats are, right?
I do not.
Not educated, employed, or in training. That's I think it's a Japanese phrase. But he just didn't want to do a day job.
Yeah, it seems like he found ways to make money though.
I don't know if he ever did. That's what I always wondered.
Well, I mean, at least scrape by. He seems like he was you know, willing to
He,
commit crimes.
yeah, he made it. I don't know. He made it beginning to end, which is pretty impressive. He went on to become a teacher at Rainier High School. Now, not Mount Rainier High School. This is in Oregon. It's Rainier High School.
Mm-hmm.
And he was kicked out for starting a super secret underground society,
Right.
which has become very mythologized. What it was apparently was a book club where they would get he would be like, "Oh, look what those liberals did today,"
Yeah.
which is also pretty Christmas-y. It's just a different kind of Christmas-y.
Yeah, he was trying to indoctrinate him young.
Yeah. He hang on, let me see if I have the can I read you the note of when Kennedy died, what the principal said about Crisman?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Crisman was teaching school on the 22nd of November, 1963, when President Kennedy was killed. When I assumed duties of principal, I had occasion to observe the actions of Mr. Crisman and found him to be a disruptive influence at school. I also caught him in a number of falsehoods and found him to be an unsuitable individual to be teaching children. Mr. Crisman claimed to be in the Air Force Reserve and on occasion wore his uniform. Crisman claimed to be a graduate of Willamette University in Salem. Um, that's the long and short of it, I guess, is he he pissed people off wherever he went and he told it the way he saw it. And then Kennedy's head blew up, and that's sort of the final major conspiracy he was involved with.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's talk about that because this is the one that I found really one of the most fascinating parts about Crisman is this association between him and like UFO conspiracy stuff and then the JFK conspiracy. So how does he pop up in the JFK conspiracy material?
Well, at the time, Crispin was famous for talking on the radio about how much he disliked Kennedy's methods. He blamed Kennedy for Bay of Pigs. He blamed Kennedy for if the air wasn't good enough that day, I'm sure. If his coffee was too cold, he really wasn't a big fan of what Kennedy was up to. And Kennedy at the time, he was the first president to have his addresses be heard in Russia. Like he was doing by he was so liberal at that point. That was crazy. How could you ever have another country like that listen to so Crisman had no sympathies. And when Kennedy's head blew up and there were people pointing fingers, there was a letter saying Fred Crisman has flown in and out of New Orleans and Dallas and all these different locations for the last few years. He's made over like 30, 40 flights. And Crisman defends it as he was selling his records with his friend Thomas Beckham, who is still alive, by the way. I've not been able to get a hold of him. If anyone can give me Thomas Beckham's phone number. So basically they asked him and he said, I might have done it. I don't know. Of course he didn't. And you can actually, if you look his name up, you can read the transcript of everything that they talked about that day when he was in court.
And that was with the Jim Garrison.
Yeah, Jim Garrison.
New Orleans district attorney investigation. Right. Famous JFK movie and all that.
Yeah, and that Oliver Stone movie, I think, had a Crisman scene that they took out, but I can't confirm that because I've never seen. I've seen the movie, but Crisman basically said, "I don't know what you're talking about. I've never had anything to do with it." There's a photo of one of the three tramps who kind of looks like if Crisman had a son with Bill Murray. Like it doesn't quite look like Crisman, but there's recordings of Jim Garrison saying that by the time he got that photo, it was Xerox so many times that it could have been anyone.
Yeah, it's still though, just to the naked eye. I mean, I'm not trained in that, but it does kind of look like him.
Look, if it was him, I'd be so interested. I'm so into the idea that Crisman did that. Obviously, when I write him as a character, he's very fictionalized, so I can't have my protagonist kill Kennedy. Unless Kennedy's an alien or something, but that would be a separate story.
Yeah,
I don't think they'd appreciate that.
Well, Crisman is supposedly, as I've always understood it, like he's supposedly supposed to be like one of the three tramps.
Right.
Or one of the handlers. Yeah.
The photo is the one of the tramps.
Yeah. Which I've also seen that same photo That same photo that's supposed to be that say is Crisman. I've also seen people say that that's E. Howard Hunt.
Right.
I don't know what E. Howard Hunt looked like. I gotta Google that. I wonder how close the Garrison ever got. Because it's so weird to think that everyone was just satisfied with the fact that it was Oswald and they just left. But have you guys seen that footage of Oswald getting shot?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't it feel staged?
I mean, it's weird.
It's just all weird, and I don't have the answer, and I don't. It was more likely than not Oswald, but there's something fascinating about watching. There's footage of Oswald's funeral. It's fascinating too. No one would be a pallbearer, so they had reporters do it. But there's all these little pieces of history. I always wonder how close Garrison got to figuring out what happened, because even the most logical version of it, there's still weird holes everywhere. There's something that stinks of conspiracy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Of course.
that's a good question. How close did Garrison get?
But unfortunately, Garrison had such strange research methods that it was really hard
Yeah,
for a lot of people to take him seriously, even though
Garrison was a product of his time and his place. But I think that I honestly don't think that he did get that close.
You think he's just completely going down the wrong track?
Yes. Um, so the whole Clay Shaw thing, right?
Right.
I think that what was going on in New Orleans in 1963 was a totally different thing than what Oswald was involved in
Okay.
when he got set up for Kennedy. I think that this was some kind of operation working with probably anti-Castro Cubans.
Sure. And there's a lot of weird mob ties and
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's what it was. I don't think it had anything necessarily to do with Kennedy necessarily now, because he in this weird way was trying to instigate these fights with these anti-Castro Cubans by posing as a communist. I think that helped in the sheep dipping of that they could say that he was a communist. Garrison had this theory that Oswald was being sheep dipped all along, and that throughout the summer of 1963. I think this was a totally different operation, a totally different thing is going on with Clay Shaw, David Ferry, Guy Bannister. And because Oswald was involved, Garrison thought that it had something to do with the assassination. But I don't think it actually did have anything to do with the assassination, other than it was used later on to say that, yeah, he was a communist handing out communist propaganda. That's kind of my theory on it. And I think that yeah, he went down the wrong rabbit hole. But that kind of is indicative of how complicated some of this intelligence operations that were going on were, if that makes sense.
I think so. It's all very strange, and the fact that Crisman would have anything to do with anything. I mean, how would you know it? And especially with the internet now, I feel like Crisman would have had an iPhone 15 in his pocket, and you would have been able to just geo-track where he was at. It's what stand-up comedian said: before the internet, you could move 2 towns over, and your family would never find you again.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
It's amazing how much easier it is to pin people with stuff now.
Yeah, who knows what he was up to. You mentioned a family member's comments, and I did want to really point out that in your research of Crisman, I mean, you're not just doing this through books and internet resources and things like that. Like, you've gone boots on the ground and have gone out to research and actually find people who knew him.
I bumped into his grandson on total accident.
Oh, wow.
I had been trying to look up who his children were. I bumped into his grandson on YouTube, who had uploaded some of Crisman's radio stuff. And I got really excited, and I immediately I went on the socials trying to find him, and he tolerated me. He's got his own life going on. and he was nice enough to tolerate me. And I wrote to his dad, who's Crisman's son, and I just said, "Hey, look, I'm not a conspiracy guy, but I did this cartoon about your dad," and as if he had written it, and just let me know what you think. And he added me on socials, and we talked. And he's the nicest dude who ever lived. He, much like his dad, was a teacher for many years. He ultimately retired, but he had a very, to where Crisman Senior, the one I fictionalize, never really had a set job. His son had a very consistent job, and I believe became principal of a independent high school. But we'll just talk on the phone sometimes, and what we actually bond over is parental trauma. His dad made a lot of poor choices. Crisman failing in terms of making a steady paycheck also had obligations as a father. And so we trauma bond over that kind of stuff because Crisman never had a job. If his son went out partying, his dad will only be upset that he didn't call him. You know what I mean? It wasn't even about missing school. So picture being the kid in like middle or high school and your dad was accused of killing the president.
Yeah.
Imagine what that does to you.
Yeah, Lee.
So he was very good at confirming and denying stuff that I'd read that, I'm trying to keep it very credible.
Right.
One of the more interesting things that happened when Crisman Sr. died, though, which I learned, is that he woke up in the hospital because he had a stroke, and he looked around and he asked, "What spaceship is this?" So I don't know what was up with him. It makes you wonder how much of this was true. He seemed to get really into science fiction.
Yeah. Wow. And then are there any other family members around in these other characters that you've met from the area?
I've met one of Harold Dahl's, I believe, nieces, who doesn't like to go public and talk about it so much. And I think all these families are actually they're a little shaken up by the actions of others because you don't want to draw that kind of attention to yourself.
Mhm.
But the only thing that we learned is that someone who is related to Dahl apparently watched the Maury Island movie and said Harold Dahl never smoked a cigarette in his life. So that's what we know about Dahl. He ended up running a junk shop in Tenino, and he would have like Uzis there and all sorts of comics where they strip the covers off the back, and it's fun to get those little vignettes of their lives
Yeah.
because you never hear those in the UFO zines.
Just-
Oh, and Crisman wrote a book
Right.
called Murder of a City, Tacoma, which is on the Wayback Machine now. It's on archive.org. I
Yep.
did a really crappy scan of it a long time ago, and then his son still had one copy, and he let me stay at his house and painstakingly retype it.
Wow.
So that version is available online too, which I recommend reading. Um,
You were like an ancient scribe or something, man.
yeah, they have these things where they had scanning ones and they had all sorts of stuff. And finally, the easiest way to do it was I got a OCR text reader, but I would do it one paragraph at a time. And if it fixed any of the misspellings, I had to go back and add the typos back in.
Right. Okay.
And I don't know, it's not the best read in the world, but it's a real character study. He mentions nothing about UFOs in the book. He just mentions how much he hates local Tacoma politics
Mm-hmm.
and everyone involved. And then he gets really angry about Kennedy for a little bit and why he was accused of killing him. But it's got neat little passages. He explains that like liberals are rats. He goes, and once rats use their rat tactics, you must use your rat tactics right back at them. And you're like, what did I just read?
Well, yeah, he was pretty extreme.
Yeah. Is there anything else you guys want to know about Crisman?
You also mentioned too that he worked for Boeing.
Oh, he did. He worked for Boeing in like God, late 60s, early 70s, and there's a whole Boeing element to the Maury Island incident too. That's another thing you got to worry about with these is he said, she said, they said.
Yeah.
Washington's one of the bigger Superfund site locations too. I could talk about Superfund sites for years, but obviously they're locations where near irreparable damage has been done to the land.
Yeah.
So we have to scrounge together super funds just to pay them off and get them cleaned up. The most famous one is Times Beach, I think, where they put they put the chemical compound of Agent Orange into the soil. So the entire town was paved over and they had to take all the soil and incinerate it.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's fascinating how that kind of stuff happens.
And I
But
think I've heard
I
some
could see
other
Crisman doing
speculation
that.
about the smelter in Tacoma.
Yeah,
Like
there was a foundry in Tacoma or
yeah, and
something
like
like that.
maybe this was some kind of, I don't know how smelters work, but it was some kind of debris from that burned them or something. But that's pretty
The
far off, I
yeah,
think.
you know, that's also a super fun site. Is they turned into a big park lately, but that whole smelter, the Maury Island debris seems to have lined up with what came out of there. But I've also heard that it's more akin to rock. We have rumor has it I have pieces of it, and by rumor has it I mean there was someone who apparently knew Crisman and found a piece of it in the trees. That was
Okay.
then given to a local history museum in Washington, who then broke off a chunk and gave it to a professor at the University of Washington, William Beatty, who I interviewed for the movie. And we tried lighting it on fire. I watched him try checking for radiation, and then he pulled something out of his pocket. He goes, "This is a radium watch tip," and I watched the Geiger counter go off. And he's like, "And this is why we know it's not radioactive." And then he put the sensor up to the debris, and nothing happened. But they claim to have a piece of the debris. Now, Dean has met Ray Palmer's son, and Ray Palmer's son, by the way, Raymond Palmer was named Raymond A. Palmer, so he named his son Raymond B. Palmer. And so he claims to have a piece of the debris that his father had.
Okay.
And I don't know if Dean's got to touch it yet, but we're hoping to compare and contrast the material that he has and see if it syncs up with the material that we have in Seattle. Um, but so far, we've learned nothing. We know
Oh
that it's some
wow.
kind of rock debris, but we don't know what.
You've got
It's
pieces of the
consistent.
metamaterials, the original metamaterials.
Yeah, exactly. It's consistent. They said it's consistent with rock formations found in Canada. So who knows? Maybe the real debris is somewhere else. But I got a little baggie of it. I was unloading a truck and I came out and I saw William Beatty there by complete accident picking up groceries. And I said, "Could you break a chunk off for me?" And he goes, "Oh, hang on." And he pulled out a bag with little tiny pieces and then goes, "This is for you." And then he just handed me a debris of or a UFO debris baggie in a little 420 bag.
And me and Adam actually witnessed this baggie. I
Oh,
can
did I show you
confirm.
guys the baggie?
Yeah, yeah, I
Yes.
can
Mhm.
confirm.
Oh, good, good. I want to show everyone that. It's ridiculous.
And I think I told Dean to make sure he didn't take that on an airplane with him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Remember,
go
we
ahead.
filmed it in a hotel and we were just going, I can't wait for the Men in Black to show up and finally put an end to this.
Yeah, so speaking of that, what are you're working on this multi-part animation, and anyone can go check out the first part on YouTube, right?
Yep. Fred
A-
Crisman, Cave of the Space Nazis.
And the larger project is this like a documentary?
Yeah. And I may call it the Crisman conspiracy, but that may step on Ken Thomas. But the first part's all Maury Island, second part's or first part's all Shaver, second part's Maury Island, and the third part's JFK.
Okay, cool. Cool.
Um, yeah, so please watch Cave of the Space Nazis. It's sort of inspired by heavy metal and Evil
Yeah.
Dead and all those pulp elements people like.
Is there any timeline for when the documentary might be released?
Oh my gosh, I'm thinking next year.
Okay, cool.
Hoping for next year.
Fair enough. Sounds like a big project.
Um,
Is it going to combine like kind of some of the animation in there
I
too?
think I don't know yet. I'm thinking of making these pulp reenactments for it where they look like old watercolor pulp covers, but I don't know how much animation is going to actually go into it. I definitely mentioned the show itself, the short films, but it's structured in a way that I'm not even in it as the announcer. It's sort of this anonymous figure that interviews everyone. But it's going to have Scott Schaefer, Steve Edmiston. It's going to have Kenneth Arnold's granddaughter. Um, it's going to have Crisman's son. It's going to have William Beatty. It's going to have a couple of professors who detract the Maury Island stuff, and it's going to have a couple of people who are so involved with Maury Island lore, like they just can't stop talking about it. And of course, it's going to have Dean in it.
Cool. Well, we look forward to that, and when that comes out, definitely want to talk about it and help you promote it.
Yeah, that would be awesome, guys.
Do you have a working title for it yet?
I'm thinking the Crisman conspiracy, and the Maury Island one is going to be called the Bloody Pulp, which I'm
Okay.
really
Okay.
excited for. I think that name bites so hard.
Yeah, that's
It's
good. That's good.
I dig it.
I was going to say it's a little opposite, but I also wanted to talk just a little bit about how you first became interested in any of this kind of weirdness, whether it's UFOs or paranormal or occult
Oh
topics or
yeah.
things like that.
When I was a kid, aliens used to scare the shit out of me. I'm still scared of the concept. Do you guys find aliens to be scary or do you find them to be hopeful?
I don't know. I think I'm pretty much on the ultra terrestrial kind of bandwagon nowadays. And
Yeah, that's where I am too.
while I don't think it's necessarily like all the way evil, I think if there is like contact with these other beings, they might really just be impartial or beyond good and
Right.
evil.
I feel that way about the universe in general.
Yeah, yeah, it's absurd. I guess that's a little bit of the Gnostic streak in me.
Yeah, yeah, no,
Yeah,
that
I think
tracks.
that
That definitely does.
I think if there's like space aliens out there, then yeah, I think it's a little bit of both for me. Like it is
Ma-
kind of a frightening prospect, but at the same time, it could be hopeful, you know? Like,
It really does lead into the question of why are we here, which I
right.
think is a big noble. Um,
Yeah.
I always wonder why are we here and what makes us happy. Those are the two big questions in the universe, and I always wonder it. But UFOs are scary. They've always scared me when I was a kid. Dark Skies is a tremendous movie. Um, Obviously, the Travis Walton Fire in the Sky movie is fake, but
Oh yeah.
very wonderful interpretation. And I sort of like that whole element of when we came to America, we weren't here to make friends. You know what I mean? And when the aliens come down, they might not be looking to make friends. They might be looking to either borrow the place
Right.
or they're going to need some new kinds of pets.
We might
And
just be in the way.
exactly. And I don't know. It's just the Betty Barney Hill stuff I got really into growing up, and
Hmm.
um, I sort of appreciated that there's been such a hard. It's hard to make aliens scary when they're in movies because it's hard to make an alien look real in a movie. Um, my parents' first date was watching the McPherson tapes. I remember. I
That's
don't. I
cool.
don't remember, but I remember them talking about it. Freaked them out,
What's the
and
McPherson taste? I don't think I've ever heard of this.
it was a scripted UFO encounter where it's entirely for first person POV, but it's a family who the power goes out and then the kid starts standing
Oh,
perfectly
yeah.
still and talking in tongues and saying crazy stuff, and they run outside and they run back in the house and there's like a gray alien standing there. It's really
Yeah,
spooky.
okay. Yeah, nah, yeah, okay. I know what you're talking about. I've never actually seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's also X-Files might have inspired me a lot because the X-Files theme used to scare me a lot when I was little. It always gave me chills up my spine.
Oh, it's great. Great
Oh, I
synthesizer
love
work.
it. I love that kind of stuff.
I think that when I was a kid, yeah, it like really did kind of scare me. Like the whole like, I
Yeah,
read
me too. I was terrified.
I read Communion when I was,
Ooh,
when I
communion.
was like probably 13 or something. It scared the shit out of me,
I want to tell you guys a funny story really quick. I don't think I've ever told this on Conspirinormal, but I would, with the lawnmower, I'd make like crop circles and symbols and shit in my
No.
backyard. And then I would be like terrified at night, like, oh shit, they're gonna see it. They're gonna come for me. Like,
Oh, that's so cool. I did a cartoon in Flash about aliens when I was very young, and I was thinking, oh, if they see that, they're gonna come to my house and they're gonna come get me, as if they're watching YouTube, going like, this one right here, we'll get them.
yeah, but I think that shows that it harkens back to the types of fears have always been with humans and especially children, whether
Oh
it's
yeah, back to the
fairies or
dragons.
goblins or whatever's going to come get you. That was just for our generations. That was the monsters that were, you know, out there.
Have you heard the theory that gray aliens are a composite of people in your memory?
No.
I have not.
I don't remember where I heard this. I think I read it in some journal, but it said that babies can retain memories, and the theory of unrepressing a gray figure watching over you on an operating table is actually related to you not being able to recognize a face as a baby, because a gray alien is just sort of like a bunch of faces composited into one. So it's actually a fearful memory that you had from when you were a baby being worked on by doctors, which I don't know if that's true, but that makes enough sense to me that I could buy it.
I have heard that there have been some people that have been in like, I don't know, like a car accident or some kind of real traumatic experience, and then they're pulled out and taken into the hospital room or by the paramedics.
Yeah.
And what they experience is very similar to like something that's an alien abduction type thing. It's just
Oh,
that their
weird.
brain is so scattered at that point that it just kind of gets it it kind of gets you know it's almost like they're in this altered state where they experience this.
Totally, totally. Was the Communion movie any good?
Yeah, it's all right.
Eric
Yeah,
Clapton did the score.
well, I mean the whole thing's weird, but I mean the movie is kind of weird, and I watched it again probably about a year or so ago, and I had not
Yeah.
seen it in a long time. And I think that it really kind of captures the otherworldliness of the experience.
Okay.
Um, but I don't think Whitley Strieber was too happy with the movie.
That'll happen. Oh,
I,
weird.
I did also want to mention that, we met there in Des Moines, which is part of South Seattle, directly across from Maury Island, and is kind of the tourist spot for Maury Island. If you're going to the area, because Maury Island itself is kind of a pain in the ass to get onto. You've got to take a ferry and stuff. Me and Adam tried to take a ferry, and like we're gonna have to wait
Yeah,
at least like 2.5 hours. So we're
it
like,
wasn't
screw
gonna
it.
happen.
But
Yeah.
they've got a great big mural that shows the incident, and then there's two like brand new mysterious sculptures that are there too.
The
And we actually
monoliths.
got together at the anniversary of the Men in Black. They have like a little community, more business leader than anything event around that where everyone dresses up like Men in Black and stuff. So that was fun. But so it's a cool little, tourist UFO tourist place, which are pretty rare, I think, really.
I appreciate that they kind of stick their neck out for the UFO guys, because, and it might just be generational. I think they hid from it for so long, but I enjoy how few weirdos there are and how many more people like your mom and dad will be there. It doesn't quite have that crazy people mythos to it anymore. It just has people enjoying themselves and appreciating a piece of local history.
Right. It seemed like a real kind of chamber of commerce type of thing more than anything.
Oh yeah, that's absolutely true.
But we had fun. And what's up with, so there's the big mural, but then there's also these two pretty much brand new like sculptures.
Are they new? So they're by the mural?
Yeah.
Oh, I
Like
haven't seen them. They're.
there's one
Let
that's
me see.
like a obelisk from 2001 or something with some like alien writing on it.
Okay, I've seen that one.
And then there's another one that's like this piece of black metal as well with this like coyote or dog or wolf like looking up to the saucer. Um, and I don't know what you're supposed to do with them. Maybe they interact or something, but it's pretty cool if you're a tourist in the area and into UFOs. That's a good photo op, and you can like look right across to where this incident supposedly took place from the pier there in Des Moines.
No, I still haven't seen it. I'm trying to Google it. That obelisk is really cool.
Of everything that was like around it.
Has anyone cracked the alien cipher that's on this?
I think it says June 21st, if I recall.
It's like a whole sentence.
I remember when that thing happened. I guess they've never said what's on there.
So there's a mystery out there for
Yeah,
you guys as well.
it moves, which is kind of cool. I've seen it move from place to place.
Okay.
It's in one part of town sometimes, and then it's in another. Um, it's something local. I'd like to believe it's more paranormal than it is. Boy, I have no idea what that says. You got to
Yeah, I
get
mean,
Scott Schaefer and Steve Edmiston on.
okay.
Oh,
But
that's
yeah,
got to be the dog looking up, right?
yeah, there's that too.
That's
Yeah.
cool. That's a gorgeous piece of art.
That was there. So yeah, it's like I said, besides Roswell, I mean, I don't, well, I guess Betty and Barney Hill have like a historic marker now, but it's a
Are
pretty
they
cool little spot.
welcomed into? Are they Betty and Barney? Are they welcomed by wherever they were from, or are they kind of frowned upon?
I think
I don't
it's
think
getting
that they
better, right?
were. I don't think that they were frowned upon.
And
Okay.
they've got that like historical marker now too, right? I
Yeah,
think
I
they've
think
had
it's
that
in.
for a
I
while.
think it's in. Yeah, I think it's in. Yeah, there's a historical marker where it happened in New Hampshire.
And then
Okay.
there's like a park too, right? Isn't there something else? I don't know.
No, well, no. I mean, there's a grave site. I went there like last year in New Hampshire.
I
Close.
could talk about them forever too. They're one of my favorite stories.
So
What do you
yeah, I
think
mean,
about? What do you think a possibility about that being a like mind control, them being mind control subjects? You ever run into that?
Who would be controlling them? Is my first.
Well, I don't know necessarily mind control would be really the right word, but like, it might
experiment,
have been
MK Ultra type
like an
experiment.
MK Ultra
Oh,
experiment. Yeah.
I could see that happening. I like that. That actually makes a lot more sense to me.
Like
Yeah.
Um,
that they got dosed with acid or something and they shine a bunch of
Right.
lights and disorient them and basically
um,
torture them and make them think they
I
saw something else.
I took a bunch of. It sounds like I'm about to say drugs. I took some psych classes. I was supposed to get a degree in psych at one point, I think, and they what I've learned is that memories are very, very fluid.
Yeah.
In fact, when you remember something, if you guys know how video games work, what you're seeing right now in real life is sort of pixel based, where you can see every detail that you're paying attention to, but your memories are all re-rendered. Your brain doesn't actually control what it doesn't save a video file. You're actually reconstructing it when you think back. So
Right.
details can actually come and go from when you, depending on the amount of time you've had since you've thought of something.
Yeah.
There's a good episode of BoJack Horseman where they flash back to a character who has dementia and things in the background start changing. And that's exactly how your brain works. Um, but Betty and Barney, Betty was known famously for what's the word? She was a character, they would say. She was a real character. And Barney was sort of an underfoot figure. He would just do whatever Betty liked doing, but he always stood by his lady, but he was always she'd say a little too much and he would just happen to agree with her. And um when they were both interviewed, the alien designs changed significantly. It went from they all sort of looked like Tommy Wiseau from The Room, or like riffraff with those big long hair, and suddenly as the gray reports started coming out, they turned more into gray, genderless, featureless aliens.
Did they come out and say, "Oh, hi, Mark"?
I wish I could get Tommy Wiseau on
Right.
something.
So, yeah, I mean that's one of the most interesting parts.
Yeah.
That so what they report, what they both report, is like basically like these kind of on the short side, but normal human sized people
Mm-hmm.
that are that they said that look like Irishmen or whatever. And I think they even described them like I think they had like red hair, like one of them. One of them like red hair, big nose. They said one of them looked like Jimmy Durante. And
like Squidward.
And so it was like that was the original that they were in uniforms. And that was the original description. And then later on they became basically more what was later going to be called the Greys, even though kind of you could say they're proto Greys, right?
Right.
And the UFO crowd, the alien abduction crowd looks at that and that would say that alien abduction is like real aliens, looks at that and says, well, them seeing the humans, that was just the screen memory, right?
Right.
And so I think that muddies the water when it's like more than likely really what it's the other way around.
I have a big belief in always having a camera on you. It always bothers me when we're talking about the Bigfoot habituators where
right.
Oh, he's actually in the other room playing Xbox, but the Kinect can't record it for some reason. Bigfoot will unplug any webcam I plug in. I have trained myself to be an ace at taking pictures when no one expects you to. And I can brag about this later, and I'll show you the picture later. But if I ever see a UFO, I'll be the first one to take a picture. I saw a squirrel eye me in my friend's backyard once, and I got a picture of two squirrels doing it and staring at me. And like just the timing of perfect, I got it. Just as they realized they saw me and ran away. I'm gonna be the person that gets a UFO on camera. Everyone else seems to not want to.
Perfect. I am in support of that.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, Bryan, this has been great, man. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, where can people find your work? And possibly get in touch with you. What's your
Oh goodness.
presence?
Just look up Bryan Shickley on Google. BryanShickley. And I also have fredcrisman.com, or you can just look up Fred Crisman on Google and you'll find the short.
Okay.
All right. You got
Excellent.
fredcrisman.com. Okay.
Yeah, and the short is on YouTube, so people can go view that. I watched it tonight, so
yeah, please do watch it.
all right, guys. Next week we're going to have Dean Bertram on. We're going to talk a little bit more about some of the same subject we talked about tonight. We're going to get into some other things as well. Also, coming up on July 24th, we are going to have Vincent Trewell coming back and doing a presentation about Bigfoot and legal aspects of Bigfoot. This will be an interesting one. So come join us for that. That is going to be happening on July 24th. That's going to be we're going to open that for everybody on our Patreon. So not just the $10 people. So anybody can join that, and that's going to be part of our monthly series. But also, if you guys want to support what we do, Surfy can tell you where to find that.
You can find that at patreon.com/Conspirinormal.
All right, perfect, guys. Bryan, I want to thank you for coming on, and we'll be back next week on Conspirinormal.